Hi everyone, excuse me, William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series, and we are in 1915 today, and our recap for 1936, we had Dmitri quoting Kirill, and Kirill saying the same thing that Dmitri had said all the way back to the beginning of his exile, which was that Russia must solve its own problems, that it must not rely on foreigners. Okay, and this very interesting comment about monarchy being a creative force and a force for progress and renewal, and it hadn't worked out that way, but you know, that was something he was promoting. Okay, and let's see, our last 1915 diary entry. Well, we just had some visitors at home, mostly in bed after his tonsillectomy. Our cast for today, we have Maria, we have Dr. Polyakov, Felix Yusupov the Younger, and the Lamings, Georgy and Maria Nikolaevna Laming, Georgy Mikhailovich and Maria Nikolaevna. So they're, you know, basically like mom and dad to Dmitri and Maria. And they lived there in the Sergei Palace, I believe. All right, we're up to the 10th / the 23rd of February in Petrograd at Nevsky 41. It's 2 degrees above freezing and overcast, so the weather's been pretty steady. I slept very well. I woke up twice, but not for long. My throat was very dry, but the wound didn't hurt. I got up around 10 o'clock. Maria came and we had coffee together. Then, in accordance with Polyakov's request, I lay in bed until he arrived around 1 o'clock. He says everything's going fine with my throat. He'll probably let me go out on Saturday, but on Sunday I'll have to have my nose cauterized and stay in bed again until Tuesday. Then I'll get a week-long break, followed by an operation to correct my deviated septum. I lunched with Maria à 2, then read until 5 o'clock. Felix came by. He was dull and rather absent-minded. We had tea. Maria sat with me until dinner was served at 8 o'clock. Both the Lamings joined us. We played Tyotka. They were shocked by the news of the death of blank, who was killed in the latest actions. We had evening tea and then parted company. Even though I was out of bed, I wore my pajamas and didn't leave my own rooms. Okay, so I wonder what his pajamas were like, if they were fancy silk or just, practical. Anyway, I said blank because neither I myself nor Natasha and Alexandra were able to make out the name of the person who died. All right, so we're having 2 more procedures. The first is a cauterization. I'm not quite sure why that would be needed. And the second will be straightening a deviated septum. And I have one, but I've known 2 people, my sister and my father, who had the operation, and they both said that was the most miserable thing they've ever experienced. And, you know, they didn't even feel like it helped so much. I'm not discouraging anybody from doing it, but on that basis, I have never had it. Okay. You know, it didn't work in Dmitri's case, because it's perfectly apparent from all of the later photographs of him that he was still breathing through his mouth. His mouth is never completely closed. Okay, he's still not telling us what he's reading. He was so good about that when he was in Usovo, but no longer. And now the main event, Felix shows up. Just a reminder, he was 4 years older than Dmitri. They got to know each other back in 1907 when Dmitri and Aunt Ella were staying, or was it later? It might have been 1900. Actually, it was later, because it was in one of the letters that he was writing to his sister. I think it was maybe 1909, 1908. I don't know. Sorry about that. I'm muddle-headed too. Yeah, so that caused, myself and other people a bit of surprise that he'd only really come to know Felix later. They'd been around each other as children, but they hadn't apparently been friends. And then when Dmitri and Ella were staying out on the Yusupov estate for a while, in Crimea, Dmitri wrote to his sister that young Felix seemed like a nice and interesting guy, and so that was the beginning of their friendship. Okay, was Felix boring? Was he possibly bored? I used the word dull, which is not quite as sharp-edged as boring. So Dmitri uses the adjective boring. Felix was boring and absent-minded or muddle-headed. He means on this occasion, of course. I'm not saying he always found Felix boring, or they wouldn't be friends, most likely. Dull. So I always tell my English students, my English as a second language students, it's a very, very common mistake. If you say, if you're bored of something, you don't say, I'm boring. You say, I'm bored. And Dmitri uses crystal clear the construction Felix was boring instead of Felix was bored. Whereas it would seem that Felix coming to visit a sick friend sitting around would more likely be bored than boring. But anyway, Dmitri probably wasn't still feeling well, And so, I don't know. Anyway, he didn't enjoy the visit, is the upshot of that. But it was nice of Felix to come. Not so many people have come so far. Then dinner with the Lamings and Maria, playing cards. And yeah, I don't know who died. When I was refreshing my memory of on Felix Yusupov, looking online, I found a list of the movies in which he's been featured as a character, and other media as well. And so it reminded me there's actually this Finnish opera about the Rasputin assassination, and I saw it as a broadcast once. I wasn't there, and with subtitles, of course. And at one point, the Empress is singing, in recitative, Felix and Dmitri are doing naughty things together. I was thinking, no, they're not. Naturally, I wasn't there. I can't say 100% that they never did a single naughty thing together, but I have not seen so much as a hint of it ever. And everything that we know about Dmitri points in the opposite direction. And, so can't a gay man and a straight man be platonic friends? I mean, in my experience, they can. I have gay male friends, no problem. But it seems like the whole idea that Dmitri was gay or bisexual comes merely from this friendship with Felix Yusupov, which is, kind of insulting, isn't it? That this idea that gay men and straight men can't just be friends. But, if you've been watching these all along, you've seen enough by now to know that Dmitri was rather aggressively heterosexual. And so this is very flimsy to claim this as the sole evidence. So it baffles me somewhat that belief at some point was not only caught on, but was taken as historical fact. And I think, that now we see that both that and the idea that Dmitri was madly in love with Irina, whom Felix married, Irina Alexandrovna, princess, the daughter of Grand Duchess Ksenia and Grand Duke Alexander, that Dmitri was madly in love with her. And that comes from Felix himself. That comes from Felix saying, yes, there was this rivalry and she chose me. But again, there's just not any indication that he was in love, alas, with any woman. And he's just flitting from one to the next. So some interesting misconceptions. We know exactly what the source is of the one, but not what the source is of the other. If Dmitri had been gay, that would be fine with me, but I just don't see it. Okay, anyway, so they play this card game with the lemmings and then call it a night. What do we have next time? Well, in the 1915, we have a rare bit of war news with quite a bit of detail. And speaking of romantic relationships, we have some men sniffing around, kind of circling Maria and sort of, apparently kind of sounding her brother out about that. All right, in 1936, we have again the generation gap, and the question arises, the accusation arises, and Dmitri has got to take that on, that young Russia is receiving money from the Kremlin. So all of that is interesting stuff. Please do come back, and I'll see you next time. Bye.